Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by SoundCloud Studios, brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson's Missing, available on Amazon, paperback and ebook. Coming soon, Missing 2 by Mia Molson's Double the Suspense, Double the Fun. Check it out on Amazon. Also brought to you by Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on the life of Dave, including theories, quiz of pains, and King David's Psalms. Amazon.com, keyword Sweet Psalmist Serena Wagner, and check out the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com. 50 podcast platforms, 110 countries. Follow us on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, plus on BitChute, Rumble, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and more. Check it out today. We're here with the amazing attorney turned author from Chicago with a major in history and serving 2 terms as student Senate president. We'll talk about that. Spent 40 plus years preparing and trying business lawsuits and achieved several notable, notable achievements, including Dennis Hastert and also they have a puck as well, most notable clients as well, and also served on the Law Review. He has a new book out, which is a monumental biography of a senator from Louisiana, a progressive thinker, populist, and also a radical influence on the New Deal. And the book is called American Populist, Huey Long of Louisiana. Live, ladies and gentlemen, plus dudes in beautiful downtown Chicago. The amazing attorney turned author from Chicago with a major in history, serving 2 terms on the student Senate president, and also spent 40 years preparing and trying business lawsuits, multi-talented Thomas Patterson. Thomas, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me on your show. It's a real thrill to be here.
Well, it's great to have you on board, Thomas. So you're an attorney turned author with a major in history, served 2 terms as student Senate president. You spent 40 plus years preparing and trying business lawsuits. You achieved several nobles, including Dennis Hastert and David Puck and more. You achieved several of that. You served on the Law Review. You have a new book out, which is a monumental biography of Huey Lewis, who's a senator from Louisiana, as a progressive thinker, populist hero, and a radical influence on the New Deal before being assassinated back in 1938 as well, 42. The book is called American Populist, Huey Long of Louisiana. And before getting to that, Thomas, tell us how you first got started.
Well, as you noted, I was a history major at Illinois Wesleyan University, and then I went to law school after that, wrote for the Law Review, and I had a job with a justice on the Illinois Supreme Court, William G. Clark, a very notable figure, and he had an amazing political career before he became a justice on the Supreme Court. Then I joined a large Chicago law firm, and I tried a lot of business lawsuits there. And I started my own law firm in the year 2000, April 14th, 2000, with 8 clients. And we've had a pretty spectacular success since then. As you noted, we sued Dennis Hastert, the former Speaker of the House of Representatives, for breach of contract. We also won the largest legal malpractice verdict in the state of Ohio. And we've had several other notable victories, some of which I can't explain because they're subject to confidentiality agreements.
Understood.
So since then, I had written a book for lawyers called Temporary Restraining Orders and Preliminary Injunctions, Handling the Business Emergency. And we've gone through 2 editions of that. It was published by the American Bar Association. But after that, I was looking for a new project. And when I saw the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, and I saw books by Piketty and Stiglitz talking about the unequal distribution of wealth, I recalled that I had been fascinated by Huey Long of Louisiana back in the 1930s, whose primary contention throughout his life was that there was a crying need to redistribute the wealth of the United States so that there would not be an unequal distribution of wealth and power. And so I had looked at the different biographies, including the spectacular one by T. Harry Williams in 1969. There was a Ken Burns documentary in the mid-1980s. And then later authors had kind of chipped away at what Williams had said and had disagreements with him. And so I thought, well, maybe I'd take a look and see if I could get my own answers. But, of course, I was helped by the internet, enormously helped, because I could get, because of digitization, I could get every Chicago Tribune article that mentioned Huey Long from 1928 to 1935. And I did the same thing for the New York Times. So I had almost a day-by-day, point-by-point analysis of what Huey was doing, and that allowed me to draw some cause and effect relationships that other biographers had missed. Then,
Hmm.
by luck, I found out that his personal papers existed at the LSU library. They had not been available when T. Harry Williams wrote his book, and later biographers had not used them to a significant extent. And that was a treasure trove of information about his early days and his conflicts with his brother and the Bank of Winfield and so on. So it was a very interesting project, much like working up a court case. You have the primary sources, you had the T. Harry Williams interviews of Huey's contemporaries, and you had what other people had written and what other people had thought and their opinions and so on. And so I just tried to construct the story of Huey Long from scratch. So there we are. And I thought that the book for lawyers took only 3 years to write. And I thought, well, okay, I could probably knock this Huey Long book out in 3 years too. And of course, that was in 2014. And the book didn't come out until February of this year.
Oh, wow. So I guess a little faster for you, that seems like so.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot of work, but of course I had to keep my day job, and so I was a lawyer by day and a fledgling author by night.
I guess that's a case of Huey is all about redistribution of wealth. In your case, this is a redistribution over time.
Yes, you're right about that. And the
And
LSU Press was kind enough to publish the book, so I'm grateful for them. But they also, uh, you know, told me to cut 130,000 words out of the manuscript, which I did, and that was a job in and of itself.
oh wow, was it like possible conflict of interest, or is just like your filler words, like as maybe like filler words and all that?
There's no question it's a denser work now than it was ahead of time, because I was getting down to the actual individual words instead of at the same time. If I said contemporaneously, I say 3 words.
Oh my, I guess a redistribution of words, we just keep building on right there too, redistribute whatever too. So
I tell you, it's like somebody said, there's no such thing as good writing, just rewriting. Or I
mhm.
think it was Faulkner who said the trouble with editing is you have to murder all your little darlings. So all those little nice sentences that I enjoyed, they had to go.
Oh my gosh, that is something, I'll tell you. And who are some of your other favorite authors and writers growing up, especially books?
Oh, I like the T. Harry Williams biography. That's the first one that got me interested in Huey Long. I liked, there's a book about Louis the 11th, the King of France in the 1400s by Paul Murray Kendall that I thought was terrific. I read the book about Rockefeller and Grant and some of the well-known biographies, Robert's biography of Churchill, those kinds of things. I like,
Okay.
a good biography, I think, has an interesting person and interesting times. And so I thought Huey was a fascinating person. He had talent, he had flaws, he had victories, defeats, comebacks. He had conflicts, that stuff you learn in eighth grade English, about conflicts. He had conflicts with his brother, the biggest bank in Winfield. He had conflicts with the Louisiana oligarch. He had conflicts with Franklin Roosevelt, and so on. He had conflicts with himself, and then you had interesting times. You've got the worst depression of the 19th century, which is when he was born. You've got the robber barons in the early 1900s. You've got World War I. You've got the Roaring '20s, and you've got the greatest depression in the United States history, and all took place within the span of 42 years of his life. So if it's a bad book, it's all my fault because I had a lot of good stuff to work with.
I was just going to ask you something as well too. That there was a Ken Burns documentary that came out. Was there a made-for-TV movie or movie that came out in theaters about Huey Long? I
Oh,
recall
sure.
something like that.
Yes, there's a movie that starred John Goodman, and there's another one
How
that
was that?
starred Ed Asner. And of course, the fictionalized version of Huey's story. I mean, it's not quite the same, but All the King's Men, Lion is in the Streets. All the King's Men was a great novel, and it was made into a movie in the 1940s and again in 2006 or 2007. Huey has had an amazing impact on novelists as well as historians. I mean, you've got It Can't Happen Here, where Sinclair Lewis wrote a thinly disguised character based on Huey Long. And so it's hard to imagine another political figure who was not president who had a similar impact on the imagination of novelists and writers and playwrights. He's had an opera written about him. I mean, the stuff that's happened because of Huey Long is quite amazing.
Mhm. If Huey Long were to run for president, would it be like an independent party, or what party would he have like been in, or what kind of party would he have created?
In preparation for the 1936 election, he was looking at whether he could start a third party. And the thinking was, under this theory, was that he could split the liberal vote with Franklin Roosevelt, elect a Republican who would do nothing about the Depression. And then in 1940, Huey would be stronger than ever and be ready to win the presidential election. He had not finally decided on that course of action. He was going to sound out sentiment by taking a tour in the West and the Midwestern states after the congressional session of 1935. And remember, he would have had all of 1936 to figure out what he was going to do and to register a new party if he decided ultimately to do that. But he was definitely looking at that. And the Republicans, fearing or counting on the fact that he would split the liberal vote with Roosevelt, were to some extent backing him financially in the hopes that he would split Roosevelt's vote and elect a Republican.
Mhm. Did FDR view it as like, as a threat, or more like as a helping, or was just like basically just neutral?
Well, with respect to politics, Roosevelt was scared to death of Huey Long. They commissioned a secret poll to gauge Long's strength, and they found that he could attract enough votes in enough states that would swing the election to the Republicans. And then he set about allocating public works and relief funds in those states where he thought was afraid that Huey Long would tip the balance of power to the Republicans. And Roosevelt was frank in admitting to some advisors that he was going to have to steal Huey Long's thunder. And if you look at his legislative program in 1935, the so called Second New Deal or the so called turn to the left, it was motivated primarily by fear of Huey Long. And some of Roosevelt's advisors, like Rexford Tugwell, gave Huey Long the credit for the passage of the Social Security Act because Roosevelt and his advisors were afraid that Huey Long would arouse support for something more substantial than the limited Social Security Act that was passed. And so you can see that and Roosevelt then uh, advocated for the first time in 1935 increased taxation on the wealthy and gave a message to Congress outlining the fact that he thought that there was an unjust distribution of wealth and income in the United States that needed to be remedied by increased taxation. And of course, the Senate, which was sick to death of Huey Long's advocacy of that, sat in stunned silence as this presidential record message was read. And then Huey was strutting around the Senate saying, "I just wish to say amen." and but of course, the Roosevelt tax plan didn't raise as much revenue as Huey thought he could raise by his proposed taxing system. And he also proposed minimum income, free college educations, generous veteran benefits, a limited working day, uh, management of farm surpluses. I mean, he had a progressive program that was and still remains somewhat relevant today.
Hmm. And do you think some of that was influenced today as well too, like with the basic income? And I think there was also what was that other one? It's like is that similar to what's going on today, like with Huey?
Well, there's no question that Bernie Sanders sounds a lot like Huey Long when he denounces the oligarchy today, and when he explains that three people in the United States own more wealth than the bottom 50% of the population combined. But it's interesting that while Sanders says that, I don't know what his plan is. Maybe I haven't paid enough attention, but I don't know what his plan is to remedy that. I mean, I know he talks about universal health care. I appreciate that. But what is he going to do about the oligarchs? What does he plan to do about it? Huey said, let's tax them. Let's tax them at 100% over a certain amount. So he had a ceiling for wealth on the one hand and a floor under wealth on the other hand, a minimum income. And if you look at the people, if you Google minimum income advocates today, you will find all kinds of business titans, Republican former Treasury secretaries, and other politicians like Daniel Moynihan, a former senator of New York, many other people who think that minimum income is a good idea. And you have to wonder, I mean, if a minimum income had been adopted instead of some of these bureaucratic programs to provide housing or food stamps or SNAP funds or whatever, you wonder what would have developed in the United States. There would have been less bureaucracy, more control over their spending by the poor, and private enterprise would have built the houses and provided the food instead of having the government decide when and where those houses were going to be built and who was going to live in them and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think that makes sense as well, too. Comparing the first New Deal and the second New Deal. We'll find more about that with Thomas E. Patterson in the book American Populist, Huey Long of Louisiana. But first, listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by SoundCloud Studios. Visit online at SoundCloudStudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. SoundCloud Studios is the answer. SoundCloud Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@SoundCloudStudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those who love you to first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia's garnered great reviews. And Eve Levin and George by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassie, Forrest Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for it goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Coming soon, Missing 2, Double Expense, Double the Fun. Check it out on Amazon. Also brought to you by the Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on the life of David, including thirst, quiz of pains, and King David's Psalms. The Sweet Psalmist gives new perspective of David through the Psalms he wrote as the time of Shepherd started and complicate your turbulent relationship with King Saul. It's a story of love, betrayal, repentance, hope, and more. Check out the Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner on Amazon. Keyword Sweet Psalmist Serena Wagner. Also check out the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com. 50 podcast platforms, 110 countries. Take us with you on a mobile device. Follow us on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, BitChute, Rumble, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and more. And for great gift ideas like t-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags, sweeties, Amazon.com. Check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia. Great books, merchandise, and more. And support the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. We're here with the amazing attorney turned author from Chicago with a major in history, and the book is called American Populist, Huey Long of Louisiana, Thomas E. Patterson here on the Mike Wagner Show. Before we get back to the book, you brought something about the first New Deal with Roosevelt and the second New Deal under Huey Long. So what's like the similarities and the differences between the first New Deal and the second New Deal?
Well, it seems to me the first New Deal started with a lot of hoopla over the National Industrial Recovery Act. And that was basically state capitalism that was proposed by Roosevelt, and Huey criticized that. And Roosevelt also cut veterans' benefits, and that was criticized by Huey. And but they had several other aspects that engendered patriotic fervor at that time. And initially, Huey had a real downturn in his prestige in 1933 because Roosevelt was very popular. Huey was criticizing certain Roosevelt programs. But even while you realize that Huey Long criticized certain Roosevelt programs, he actually strengthened other New Deal programs that were issued in the first New Deal. For example, Roosevelt proposed a banking reform act because all the banks had failed at the time of his inauguration. Huey is the one who advocated insurance of bank deposits, which had a leading role in restoring confidence in the banks by the people. And he
FDIC,
also proposed,
right?
Pardon me?
FDIC?
Yes. And then Huey also proposed, which was missing from the original Roosevelt legislation, protecting state banks, not just the federal banks, because there were 75% of the banks were state banks and only 1/4 of the banks were federal banks. So Huey wanted to propose protecting the state banks as well as the federal. And Roosevelt, because of Huey's pressure, advocated that, ultimately signed that bill that included those 2 provisions, which strengthened the early New Deal. But by opposing the cuts to veterans benefits and by opposing the National Industrial Recovery Act, Roosevelt cut off Huey's patronage. And then at that time, Huey also had an encounter at a country club where he got punched in the eye, and that was front page news all over the country.
Ooh.
And people said, they said he was inebriated and been overserved and so on. And so that accompanied a downturn in his prestige, even in Louisiana. And as a kind of a comeback from that, he started what he called the Share Our Wealth Societies in February 1934, in which he advocated limiting fortunes, minimum incomes, free college educations, and the like. And those societies spread like wildfire. And where by April of 1935, he had estimated 7.5 million members. And by September of that year, when he was killed, they estimated he had 9 million members of that society. And that's when Roosevelt turned to the left in his administration by adopting some of Huey Long's proposals, increased taxes on the wealthy, Social Security, and similar legislation.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's also what we covered as well too. Funding college, paying old age, ensuring bank deposits, and it's also increasing the money supply. I think that was a big one right there. I mean, a lot of it because he used money, right?
Oh yeah, and the thing is, Huey wanted to really expand the money supply, uh, but Roosevelt convinced the progressives who advocated that to give him the discretion whether to increase the money supply, and then he really didn't do it. And so the progressives like George Norris and Burton Wheeler and Huey and the rest of them wanted to increase the supply of money, but Roosevelt was kind of recalcitrant on that, and that retarded the recovery. I mean, the recovery would have been faster, more enduring if he had increased the expenditures on public works and if he had increased the supply of money.
Mm-hmm. You talk about the expenditure of public works as well too, with the infrastructure, rebuilding bridges, sidewalks, everything like that. And this came to mind. Increasing money supply would have been great. Do you think they would have also increased inflation, or would that would that lower the value of the dollar or anything like that? Because you hear about money supply, you print out more money. Would that back in the day increase the value of the dollar, or would have decreased the value of the dollar back in 1935 or around that time?
Yeah, I think that if you print money, the value of the dollar will decline to some extent. But what we should remember, in my opinion, is that in 1928 or 1929, we had, say, 50 billion in circulation. I can't remember what the exact number was, but by 1932 or 33, we had like $29 billion in circulation. I could be a little off on the numbers, but we had a tremendous decline in the supply of money. And that either, in some economists' view, that caused the depression. In other economists' view, it prevented or retarded the potential recovery. I mean, and these is conservative economists today, like Milton Friedman advocated increasing the supply of money or keeping it. I mean, he didn't want inflation, huge inflation, but he wanted to increase the supply of money. And economic thought of the day just didn't realize how important the inflating the money supply would be. And one other point, we had huge deficit spending to pay for World War II. I mean, about $50 billion per year. I mean, that's just huge numbers. But where did that money go to? That money went to people who had been previously unemployed or underemployed. And so those people now had more money, even if the dollar was worth less, they had more money than they had before. And the people that were sitting on their wealth had less of a total percentage of the money supply than they had previously. So I don't agree that we should always print money no matter what the circumstances are. But I think if we had increased the supply of money in the 1930s, it would have helped alleviate the Great Depression.
Mhm. And do you think increasing money every single year would have helped the economy more and prevent inflation?
Well, I think if the gross national product had kept up with the money supply, I think the inflation would be minimized.
Okay. And plus, I'm sure in Huey's case as well, too, being in Louisiana, he wished he had some money supply as well growing up. And it was a rough start for him.
Oh, there's no question about it. And if you look at Huey's program in the state of Louisiana in 1930, 31, 32, he had a huge $100 million bond program. Now they were sold in $15 million tranches. and he was employing about 10 or 20% of the entire country's workforce on roads in Louisiana. He built something like 2,000 miles of roads plus bridges, the first bridge over the Mississippi, all kinds of new state capitol that was the tallest building in the South, a new airport. He had huge public works projects in Louisiana. And there is a writer who studied the fiscal income of Louisiana at that time. And while the income of Louisiana declined, it declined about half as much as the decline was in other states because Huey had used bond financing, deficit financing, to keep public works and to keep money in the hands of the people. So I think it shows that fiscal policy, that is deficit spending under certain circumstances, it can alleviate a depression.
Mm-hmm. And plus, he had his share of successes and faults as well, and even issues in the family as well, especially his brother you're talking about.
Well, yeah, Earl Long had a very colorful career after Huey died. He was lieutenant governor on the ticket that was elected after Huey's death, and then he lost the election in 1940 to a reform candidate because some of the Huey's leaders had stolen money, and there were Louisiana scandals in 1939, right before the 1940 election. And then Earl made a comeback in 1948 and won the governorship, and served four years there. And then he won the governorship again, I believe, in 1956, but had that infamous nervous breakdown caused by a series of strokes that was memorialized it was unfairly memorialized in the Blaze Star movie. But there's a great book by A.J. Liebling of the New Yorker chronicling Earl's adventures. And there's a fellow in Louisiana named Jack McGuire who has written a great book about Earl Long's last campaign in 1960 for Congress, in which his theory was he was going to win the race or die trying. And he won the race and had a heart attack right after he won.
That was fitting. I gotta say that. And Huey Long suffered the same fate as well too. And how do you manage to get assassinated? We'll find out when met with Thomas E. Patterson of American Populist, Huey Long of Louisiana. You listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by SoundCloud Studios. Brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Moses missing. The Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on the life of David, including 30 squares of paintings and King David Psalms. Amazon.com, keyword Sweet Psalmist Serena Wagner. We'll be back with the amazing author from Chicago, Thomas E. Patterson of American Populist, Huey Long of Louisiana, after this time out. We're back at Thomas E. Patterson of American Populist, Huey Long of Louisiana, here on the Mike Wagner Show. We covered Huey Long's legacy in the book as well, and he was assassinated, however, that was in 1935. And tell us more about that, and how did that lead up to the assassination?
Yeah, Huey had called a special session of the legislature in September of 1935. And one of the bills was to gerrymander a political opponent out of a judgeship. The judge's name was Benjamin Pavey. And he had a son-in-law named Carl Austin Weiss, who was a well-regarded ear, nose, and throat specialist practicing in Baton Rouge. And he officed in a building that was full of anti-Long politicians. He had been in Europe and had seen some of the European dictators operate. There was a rumor going around that Huey was going to smear his family by accusing his wife's family, I think it was, of being part black. I don't think that rumor was well founded. And he the stories vary after that. I mean, there have been 4 books on the assassination alone, and 3 out of the 4 consider that Carl Weiss did not shoot Huey, that he was killed by a stray shot from one of his bodyguards. But when the best evidence is that Carl Weiss, for whatever reason, the motive is still a mystery, hid behind a column at the Louisiana State Capitol, approached Huey, drew his gun from behind a hat, and shot him. And one of Huey's companions had struck at his arm, so the shot was deflected downward away from his heart, but it pierced the kidney, and Huey was taken to the hospital right away. And there was an operation that didn't cure the bleeding, and he died 2 days later at about 4:10 or 4:06 in the morning. And so the conspiracy theories are that Weiss went up to Huey and struck him, or they had some kind of an argument, and then the bodyguards went berserk and drew their guns, and Huey was hit by a ricocheted shot. But the state police reopened the investigation in the 1990s, and they found the pictures of Huey's clothes, and they found the assassination weapon. And while the evidence is not airtight, there were powder burns in Huey's clothes, precisely where the eyewitnesses said Weiss shot Huey. So I think it's pretty unbelievable that a ricocheted bullet would cause powder burns. I just don't think that that's particularly possible. And I don't think there's a reason to disbelieve this several eyewitnesses to the event that said Weiss just walked up and shot him.
Hmm.
But Jack McGuire, the guy who wrote the book on Earl Long, is writing a book on the assassination that'll be out next year. And I expect that he will have the last word on it.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about having the bullet ricochet off and hitting Huey as well. Could that been from one of the columns? Maybe having that powder or that concrete, whatever it is, just like just give it off like that. Could it be like just hit one of the columns like that, concrete or anything?
Well, there are people who have gone down to the state capitol and they will show you where some of the bullet holes hit in the wall. I don't know if those panels of marble are still available, or actually are the ones. But if you go down to the Louisiana State Capitol, they will show you where the bullet holes are. And they used to have a display cabinet there that would explain the assassination. But I just don't think that I mean, the bodyguards there were 61 bullet holes in Carl Austin Weiss, at the end. I mean, they just shredded him. They were, crazed by rage or grief or whatever, and they just pumped all these bullets into him, and so he was dead right on the spot. But I just don't think that you would have powder burns from a ricocheted shot. There's no question that bullets are probably ricocheting around there, but I just don't think a bullet without a powder burn, if there's a powder burn on his clothes and there's only one hole. Some theories have said that there were 3 different shots or 2 different shots. There's one person said that, in the mortuary, somebody came in and removed a bullet from Huey's body. None of that stuff makes sense to me based on all the evidence.
How about the movie starring John Goodman? How did that depict the assassination?
I can't remember now how the Goodman movie depicted it. That movie took some liberties with the facts, and I didn't rely on that for analyzing how Huey was died and how he was assassinated, or what Carl Austin Weiss did or didn't do.
Okay, and plus, a word about the book as well too. That and I guess I just cover the bases right here. And where can we find your book, American Populist, Huey Long of Louisiana?
Well, it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, and it should be in. And if it's not in the other major bookstores, ask for it and get it in there.
All right, and become populist as well if you order Huey. You do
That's
something like
right.
that. You got, and we can find your other works. And what's your website, Tom?
The website is pattersonlawfirm.com, and I also have a website, pattersonbooks.com. You can find the book on preliminary injunctions, which is mainly of interest to lawyers. That is also available on Amazon, although it's quite expensive.
All right, well, certainly check those out. We're with the amazing author Thomas E. Patterson of American Populist, Huey Long of Louisiana, here on the Mike Wagner Show. Tom, just a few more things. What else can we expect from you 2025 and beyond?
Well, I'm thinking about a couple of different books, but I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to write on next. I might write something on the perception of Nazis in the United States. I've thought about doing a memoir of some lawyer stories, and I've thought about writing a novel, but I haven't. I have an idea, but I have never written a novel, so I suppose it'll be something new. But of
And
course,
I,
writing this book is new too. I've never been a promoter of a book before. This is kind of an interesting situation for me to find myself in. And I appreciate people like you putting me on the show so that I can discuss the book and generate some interest in it.
and of course, another step below, distributing time, wealth, and everything like that to see how long the next book is going to take. I think to be an interesting journey.
Yeah, and I'm getting up there in age, so I better hurry up, right?
You got that right. Redistribute age. I think that's another one too. So
That's a surefire winner.
you got that right. Yeah. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
Oh, I'd say my first bosses, the partners there, Max Wildman, Tom Allen, Bernie Harold, Stu Dixon, were influences on my law career. Uh, in terms of my history influences, I suppose my professors in school were influences on me, and they've been supportive in my efforts to write this book. They're thrilled for me to have written it and very supportive. So that's good.
Okay, that certainly is. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
Ooh, I would say, Huey was asked by a 16-year-old boy what his life advice was. And Huey wrote a couple of sentences about his career, and then he said, make the most of your opportunities. And so if I was going to give advice to somebody, I think that's pretty good advice. It's very abstract, yes, but it puts you in the right frame of mind. What is an opportunity? How do I capitalize on it? How do I make the most of it? I think that's good advice for people.
And I think that's the best advice out there, too. We need to take advantage of it. Here with author Thomas E. Patterson of American Populist, Huey Long of Louisiana, here on the Mike Wagner Show. Tom, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely amazing. Learned a lot. Looking forward to having soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Laugh at you back. What's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people purchase or check out your book?
That's great. Yes, if anybody wants to check it out, look at Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com or check out my website, PattersonLawFirm.com or PattersonBooks.com. Get in touch with me in Chicago. My number's on my website. I'd be happy to talk to anybody or sign copies of the books. I've had people write me from as far away as Australia asking for signed copies of the book. It's pretty interesting and amazing how far Huey Long's reach goes.
That certainly is amazing. He'd be definitely popular as well. Once again, Tom, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to having soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Laugh have you back. We wish you all best. And Tom, you definitely have a great future ahead.
Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate being on your show.